Welcome to CBAHI Standards and Survey Process Orientation Program. We will start with discussing the leadership chapter. Why good leadership is important. Effective leadership creates the organization's culture that fosters continuous improvement of services and safe patient care practices. Work relationships and best practice-based care are influenced by how the leadership group carry out its decision-making process and optimal inclusion of stakeholders. Leaders shoulder the responsibility to ensure that the organizational mission and vision are developed and communicated to staff and customers. To fulfill organizational mission, resources are expected to be provided and collaborative work relationships to be managed. The legally accountable entity in an organization is its governing body. The hospital leadership group is ultimately responsible for the quality and safety of the services provided. The leadership group, or the hospital leaders, consist of the hospital director, medical director, nursing director, senior administrators, and heads of medical departments. The first standard requiring having an effective governing body. The governing body of any given organization is the ultimate entity accountable for its operations and services. It carries the responsibility to ensure overall organizational alignment with its mission towards achieving its vision. If any legal matter rises related to the conduct of the organization staff or the quality of the services provided, the governing body is expected to be held liable. Organizations need to be governed through clear bylaws that describe the specific responsibilities, authorities, and roles within its structure. It's very important to have bylaws to help achieve the mission of the hospital, have a smooth relationship between the board and the stakeholders, have a clear process how executives are selected, and how the governing body will have its own performance evaluation. To have an effective governing body, LD 1.1 emphasizes the rationale of a formally structured governing body. LD 1.2 states the required documents that project the structure of the organization and its governing body, and how it fulfills its mandates through a comprehensive bylaws. LD 1.3 explains how the governing body ultimate accountability for the hospital performance would be achieved. In cases where the governing body opts to delegate a number of its responsibilities to the hospital director or to the hospital executive committee, this must be clarified in the bylaws or in a similar document. Nonetheless, the governing body is expected to approve strategies, annual budget, and delegation of authority policies. LD 1.4 requires minutes documentation of the governing body meetings. If an organization has reservation sharing some high-level documents with the specific data, especially financial data, as surveyors, we honor that, and we request to see any documents reflect that the governing body carries out its mandates without the financial details. Standard LD3 discusses the hospital compliance with laws and regulations affecting the healthcare sector and how hospitals comply with those that influence their organization type, as in governmental versus non-governmental facilities. Laws and regulations aim to maintain ethically conscious organizations. Different sectors have general national laws that govern their operations in addition to those specific to their type and scope of work. Hospitals are expected to identify those laws and regulations and to ensure that their operational policies and processes are guided by them. Hospital leaders are expected to monitor adherence to the identified laws within their authority and scope of work. For LD 3.1, We expect to see a list of the laws and regulations relevant to the hospital type and scope of services. For example, for a governmental hospital, we should see the Ministry of Civil Service laws included in the list. For a private hospital, the list must include Ministry of Labor. Organizations would include, of course, the Saudi Ministry of Health, Saudi Civil Defense, and Saudi FDA, to mention a few. LD10 is one of the standards focusing on the leader's role in driving the quality improvement initiative in the hospital. The intent of this standard is to emphasize the role of leaders in the performance improvement process and ensuring transparency in the information shared within the hospital and with the community. In order for leaders to drive effective quality initiatives, they need to be familiar with concepts and tools that enable them to interpret quality reports that contain the use of quality improvement methodology, tools, and diagrams. Healthcare facilities are established in order to serve patients and the communities around them. LD11 addresses how community needs and inputs are considered during organizational planning and service delivery. In order to develop a comprehensive strategic goals and as part of establishing needed services, hospitals need to identify the communities they are serving, initiate communications with the leaders of these communities, and solicit their inputs on how the hospital can optimize its service provision to fulfill those needs. LD 11.1 includes examples of who are the possible community leaders. Other possibility could be schools' headmasters or representatives if the hospital is located near them. Hospitals present lists of the leaders they have identified and samples of documentations of meetings or activities in which they have participated. The documentation may be in the form of communications or emails, minutes of meetings, pictures of focus groups, and/or summary reports of those leaders' inputs. The planning process had been discussed in several standards within the leadership chapter and addressed as well in other chapters such as in management of information. In the rapid times we are in today, organizations are expected to develop organizational plans and strategies that help them cope in a fast-changing world. Goals, strategies, and tactics development process help bring all leaders on board. To have this process documented in charts, minutes, and/or reports reflect how challenges, threats, and opportunities were considered in the planning process. Mission and vision statements should guide the planning process to ensure fulfillment of the organization's purpose. Input from different stakeholders affected by the hospital directions and services should be solicited. Departments and units' goals and objectives are expected to cascade down from the hospital goals and priorities. Leaders should ensure organizational alignment and the provision of needed resources per approved plans. The focus of LD12 is the inputs hospitals need to solicit and consider prior to developing their goals and objectives. To evaluate the standard requirements, we review minutes of meetings or interview leaders on how the goals were derived. The overall goals should address the substandards through stated strategic dimensions. For example, there will be a goal addressing community needs and another related to finance and cost management. LD13 addresses budgeting as a collaborative process. Budgeting process is a key part of planning. It assures feasibility of targets and goals and allocates the needed resources so that goals can be achieved and operations are smooth and safe for patients and staff. Outcome of the financial planning process is a budget developed through coordination and communication between leaders and facilitated by a qualified finance director. The requirements for Standard 13 are verified through reviewing the personnel file of the Finance Director and reviewing documentations of meetings and communications reflecting stakeholder involvement and the approval of the governing body, either on the budget itself or as stated in a formal meeting minutes. The standard aims to ensure participatory culture in hospitals where committees oversee hospital-wide processes, clinical and non-clinical, and monitor them to ensure best practice and safe care and services. Leaders are expected to ensure that patient care is based on current knowledge and best practice. This is reflected on clinical practice guidelines, benchmarks, and policies. Policies and procedures approvals should indicate involvement of concerned departments and services. Meeting minutes should reveal how leaders manage problems and conflicts. A note for LD 14.1, it has a different scope from clinical research trials addressed in PFR 16. LD 15 addresses hospital strategic plan requirements. LD 15 is regarding hospital strategic plan as an outcome of a collaborative process. It encompasses all the elements addressed in the planning process discussed earlier. Operational plans are derived from the overall goals and include measures to ensure their progress and success. LD 15 is evaluated through the review of the hospital strategic plan and its annual appraisal. The plan should include an overview of the planning process, reflected, for example, in the SWOT or PEST analysis summary, data of demographic changes, and summary of stakeholders' input. The broad goals and objectives may span over 3 years to 5 years. LD 15.6 onwards require that hospital strategic goals and objectives to be translated into an operational plan that clarifies the actions, responsibilities, timeframes, and resources needed to achieve those goals. To facilitate the progress monitoring of the operational or action plan, indicators are set and reviewed periodically. LD 16 speaks about manpower planning and leaders' role in recruitment and selection. Within the planning process and in order to have goals materialize, resources must be planned accordingly. Above all assets and resources are the manpower and talents needed to accomplish hospital mission and objectives. Leaders ensure that staffing and skills are planned, acquired, and continuously developed. LD 16 illustrates the requirements for the hospital-wide staffing plan. This standard is related to Standard HR2 that addresses the detailed staffing needs at departmental level. As recruitment of qualified talents is a dynamic exercise, staffing plans should be reviewed annually. Heads of departments must be actively involved in the planning and selection process. LD 17, a process for delegation of authority and functions. No man is an island. In order to achieve smooth and timely workflow, some authorities and responsibilities need to be delegated to those qualified to carry them out. Having a clear organization structure is vital in defining the delegation line to subordinates systematically. Authorities within an organization should be clearly defined in its bylaws. It always flows from top to bottom. Job descriptions and assignments clarify the scope of authority for those in supervisory and leadership positions. Accountability always rests with the person with the utmost authority. The standard emphasizes that delegation considers suitable qualifications for the task being delegated. The policy for delegation of authority may be part of the bylaws. It typically contains the hierarchy of delegation for financial and administrative authorities, as well as the process for temporary delegation during times of absence. It may include general statement about what may not be delegated, such as termination of employment, for example. LD18 highlights the importance of an effective internal and external communication. Hospitals are complex organizations that rely heavily on information exchange in order to provide services. Today, communication channels have overwhelmed leaders and staff. Hospitals need to establish their policies that explain the chain of information flow and how communications within the hospital and with external entities would be carried out. Failures in managing communications may result in staff and patient dissatisfaction or may lead to legal issues. We evaluate LD18 through the presence of a policy describing roles and responsibilities for vertical and horizontal communications. The policy may include a table or a matrix on the different types of information, the modes of communication, who are the entities sending and receiving them, and the time frame for each type. The policy may include communications with the media and handling social media outlets as they project the image and reputation of the hospital. Within the same policy or in a separate one, incoming requests, especially for acceptance of cases and patient transfer procedures, must be clarified. Other communications would include those related to medical legal matters and release of information. We also review different departmental meeting minutes to ensure communication reaches all levels and that staff have an outlet to voice out their concerns. LD19 addresses how introducing a new process or changing an existing one is done in a systematic manner. To cope with environmental and industry pressures, new processes will be introduced and existing ones may be updated or replaced. This could be caused by new technologies, best practice and research data recommendations, or regulatory requirements. Hospitals must ensure that change follows a systematic process and is communicated to concerned entities. The standard may be evaluated through review of a large-scale quality improvement project or a change in the information technology used in the hospital. For example, the project report should detail the planning phase where customers are identified and rationale for the project is illustrated. Reports from the pilot phase should be reviewed with analysis of the trial and the actions taken accordingly. The project phases are to include staff orientation and training schedule. Monitoring of the project implementation may be done through one or more indicators, such as timeliness and variations reported. LD20 Policy and Procedure Management Process. In an effort to ensure uniformity of service delivery and clarity of rules and regulations, policies and procedures are developed. To manage and control the overflowing of policies, a process must be in place to ensure evidence-based, consistent, and continuous care. Almost 25% of survey activities involve review of policies and procedures and is conducted by all surveyors. Compliance to LD20 is more complex than other standards. Although the requirements are listed in the substandards, hospitals have their unique ways of complying with these requirements. Significant for us as surveyors is to ensure the basic elements are included in the hospital's policy management process and not to go beyond that based on our different experiences. The policy on policies may be part of the overall document management system and tracking or an independent one. Most importantly is staff awareness on how to access hospital-wide policies and departmental ones, and the lack of contradictions in the content of these policies. LD21 addresses overseeing contracts and outsourced services. Many organizations decide to outsource services as part of their initiatives for cost reduction, access to specialized expertise, or reducing operational burden. It is important that selection of outside contractors follow identified criteria and the quality of their services are monitored. The compliance to Standard 21 is reviewed during the contract review session conducted by infection control and FMS surveyors. As leadership surveyors, we review the contract management and oversight policies to ensure they address involvement of different hospital leaders and staff in the process. Tools such as checklists should be designed to ease daily or periodic monitoring according to the services contracted. We also review reports concerning the performance of the service provider and the actions taken to rectify any unfavorable findings. LD23 Safe Management of Medical Supplies and Devices. With advancement in healthcare research, wide range of new state-of-the-art devices have overwhelmed the markets. Regulatory bodies such as Saudi FDA had established rules to ensure that only those proven safe are used in Saudi hospitals. To manage the vast options of suppliers and to eliminate wasting valuable resources, selection criteria for suppliers, reporting of device adverse effects, and managing the recall process should be established. To evaluate LD23, we visit the medical supply store and meet with the in-charge. We review their departmental manual where the processes or policies on supplier selection criteria, storage and management of supplies, and recall system should be available. Records are expected to show monitoring of storage requirements as well as par-level control. A sample of reported incident of adverse effect and how it was handled should be reviewed. A documentation of a product that had been recalled by the manufacturer, supplier, or with changed regulatory body requirements should be verified. LD24 Hospital leaders collaborate to optimize the flow of patients. The care process occurs through different settings, be it patient visits in the outpatient clinics or in the emergency room. He or she may have to go through multiple areas for diagnostic procedures or referrals and consultations. Prolonged intervals between those settings may result in dissatisfaction and underutilization of resources. Smooth patient flow through the different stages in the hospital must be closely monitored by the leaders. There is more than one way compliance to this standard can be evaluated. The hospital may include improving patient flow as one of its objectives with clear action plan and progress or completion report. For example, a project on patient delayed during discharge or delays in admissions. The hospital may present a QI project regarding prolonged waiting time in the radiology department, for instance. Another evidence could be actions taken resulted from patient complaints or satisfaction data. Note, compliance may be also linked to LD19, LD31, or QM8 and QM9. LD31 Departmental Performance Improvement. As the old saying goes, you cannot improve what you do not measure. Based on a department scope of services, annual objectives, and regulatory body requirements, heads of departments select what they want to closely monitor. Other measures may be triggered by an adverse event or customer dissatisfaction. The coming two slides explain further the rationale for outcome measurement. This standard may be evaluated during unit visit activity or during the quality committee interview session. A comprehensive presentation of compliance to this standard would include how an objective had been selected based on hospital strategic goals, QI or risk management plan, how the indicator was defined and if a benchmark had been identified. If this indicator had resulted in a QI project, the indicator or project report should show team members, data trends, and actions taken. The meeting minutes reflecting discussions related to prioritizations of actions and recommendations, and other communications related to high-level financial or other resources such as training being provided.